Ferrari are not in trouble because Leclerc crashed. They are in trouble because the crash may prove they saw the danger coming. Charles Leclerc hit the wall in Monaco at home, in a Ferrari fast enough to fight for a huge result. But while his race ended in disaster, Lewis Hamilton finished second in the other red car. That one detail changes everything. Because now the investigation is not just asking why Leclerc crashed. It is asking why one Ferrari looked stable enough for the podium, while the other exposed a brake problem Charles had already been warning about. And if the data confirms Ferrari knew the brakes were unsafe, or that Hamilton's side already had the better solution, this could become one of the biggest internal storms of Ferrari's season. One podium, one crash, one brake problem, and one brutal question Maranello cannot escape. Did Ferrari fail Leclerc before he ever reached the wall? Subscribe to the channel. Monaco did not create Ferrari's problem. It revealed it. That is why Leclerc's crash became so much more dangerous than a normal racing incident. Because the moment the Ferrari went into the wall, the story did not begin with the impact. It began before that, with the brake warnings, with the discomfort Charles had already felt, with the different direction on Hamilton's side of the garage, with a Ferrari fast enough to fight, but not yet trustworthy enough to protect both drivers when the pressure reached its highest point. And that is what makes Ferrari's situation so serious. If a slow car crashes, the explanation is simple. The driver was overreaching. The team had no pace. The result was never truly there. But this was not that kind of weekend. Ferrari had speed in Monaco. Real speed. The SF26 looked capable in the slow corners, sharp enough in the tight sections, and strong enough for Lewis Hamilton to finish second. That one result changes the whole story. Because Hamilton's podium proves Ferrari were not lost. It proves the car had a working version. It proves that somewhere inside the same garage, the same project, and the same race weekend, Ferrari had a package that could survive Monaco and turn potential into points. But Leclerc's crash proved the opposite truth at the same time. The car still had a dangerous weakness. And for Ferrari, those two truths are now colliding. One side of the garage can say the car is strong. The other side can say the car failed to give enough trust under braking. Both statements can be true. That is the problem. Because in Formula One, the most dangerous problems are not always the obvious ones. A broken suspension is clear. A damaged floor is clear. A failed engine is clear. But a car that is fast, yet unpredictable in one critical phase, is far harder to manage. It tempts the team to keep pushing. It tells the engineers the performance is there. It tells the drivers the result is possible. And then, at the worst moment, it exposes the part of the car that was never fully under control. For Leclerc, that part was the braking. And braking in Monaco is everything. A driver can deal with many weaknesses across a lap. A little understeer. A nervous rear. Tires that are not perfect. A car that needs to be guided carefully through certain corners. But if the driver cannot fully trust the brakes, Monaco becomes a nightmare. Because every corner begins with belief. The driver approaches the braking zone at speed, with walls waiting close enough to end the race instantly. He presses the pedal, expects the car to slow, begins to release pressure, turns in, and trusts the rear axle to stay with him. That sequence has to feel natural. It has to feel repeatable. It has to feel honest. If it does not, the driver is no longer attacking. He is surviving. And at Monaco, surviving is not enough when a podium is on the line. This is why Leclerc's warning matters so much. He had already been uncomfortable with the braking feeling. He had already felt the car was not giving him the confidence he needed. And when a driver keeps carrying the same concern, especially into Monaco, it becomes more than a complaint. It becomes a risk. Ferrari may have believed that risk was manageable. That is the key word. Manageable. Teams live with manageable problems all the time. They race with small compromises. They accept imperfect balance. They choose one setup weakness to gain strength somewhere else. They make decisions based on probability, performance, driver preference, and the brutal reality that no Formula One car is ever perfect. But Monaco has a way of punishing the word manageable. Because a manageable brake issue can become an unmanageable crash in one corner. That is what the investigation now has to confront. Not just whether Leclerc made a mistake. Not just whether he braked too late. Not just whether Monaco did what Monaco often does. The deeper question is whether Ferrari allowed a known weakness to reach the race in a form that was still too dangerous. That question is uncomfortable because of Hamilton. Hamilton's Ferrari finished second. And Hamilton's side of the garage had been working with a different braking direction, a newer solution that appeared to give him more stability and confidence. That detail makes the entire situation sharper. Because if Ferrari already had a more stable direction available, then Leclerc's crash becomes much harder to explain as simple bad luck. It becomes a question of timing. Why was the solution not fully on Charles's side? Why was the team still split in brake direction? Why was the home driver still using the configuration that had already given him discomfort? And why did the answer seem to be sitting on the other side of the garage while Leclerc's race ended in the wall? Those questions do not automatically mean Ferrari were careless, but they do mean Ferrari are under pressure. Because in elite sport, not fixing a problem in time can look very different from ignoring it completely. Sometimes it looks like caution. Sometimes it looks like compromise. Sometimes it looks like respecting a driver's comfort. Sometimes it looks like waiting for a better moment to change direction. But if the problem ends in a crash, every one of those decisions gets re-examined. That is exactly what Ferrari now face. They have to re-examine the chain. Leclerc's feedback, the brake data, the setup choice, Hamilton's configuration, the behavior of the rear axle, the way the car slowed or failed to slow before the impact, and most importantly, the point where a technical concern became a driver confidence problem. Because confidence is not a soft detail. Confidence is performance. A driver who trusts the brake pedal can brake later. He can attack the entry. He can place the car with precision. He can use the full performance of the machine. A driver who does not trust the brake pedal starts losing speed before anyone can see the reason. A few meters earlier on the brakes. A slight delay turning in. A small hesitation when the car needs commitment. Those moments may look tiny. But in Formula 1, tiny becomes everything. And in Monaco, tiny becomes the wall. That is what Ferrari must understand now. Leclerc did not only lose points. He lost a piece of trust in the car. And trust is much harder to repair than carbon fiber. The damaged Ferrari can be rebuilt. The broken parts can be replaced. The mechanics can work through the night, and the car can look perfect again. But the next time Charles reaches a heavy braking zone, he will not be asking whether the bodywork is new. He will be asking whether the pedal feels right. That is the real test. If the car answers cleanly, the healing begins. If the feeling is still uncertain, Monaco follows him. And if Monaco follows him while Hamilton continues building momentum, Ferrari's internal tension grows. That is the part Maranello must control. Hamilton's second place was huge for Ferrari. It gave the team proof. It showed that the SF26 can fight. It showed that Hamilton is not just adapting slowly in the background. He is already giving Ferrari results and technical direction. But that good news comes with a shadow. Because Hamilton's success makes Leclerc's crash harder to contain. It makes every comparison sharper. It gives one side of the garage more authority. It makes the investigation more politically sensitive, because any conclusion about the brake direction could affect the balance between the drivers. If the newer direction becomes the standard, it may look like Ferrari are moving toward Hamilton's solution. If they hesitate to adopt it fully, it may look like Ferrari are protecting Leclerc emotionally at the cost of performance. That is a dangerous place for a team to stand. Because Ferrari need both drivers. They need Hamilton's experience, calm, and ability to guide development. They need Leclerc's speed, commitment, and emotional connection with the team. They need both cars scoring, both cars developing, and both drivers believing the project belongs to them. A title-level Ferrari cannot be built on one confident driver and one wounded driver. That is why this investigation matters beyond the crash. It is not only about blame. It is about whether Ferrari can turn two opposite Monaco stories into one clear direction. Hamilton gave them the positive evidence. Leclerc gave them the warning evidence. The podium says the car can work. The crash says the car can still fail in the exact area where the driver needs total trust. Ferrari have to listen to both. If they listen only to Hamilton's podium, they risk ignoring a dangerous flaw. If they listen only to Leclerc's crash, they risk missing the fact that the car has real potential. The right answer is harder. Use Hamilton's result to understand what works. Use Leclerc's crash to understand what must never happen again. Then build a version of the car both drivers can trust. That sounds simple. At Ferrari it is not. Because every decision now carries meaning. A brake update is not just a brake update. It becomes a signal. A setup change is not just a setup change. It becomes a comparison. A public statement is not just a public statement. It becomes evidence for fans, media, rivals, and both sides of the garage. Ferrari have to be precise. They cannot hide behind vague explanations. They cannot reduce the crash to emotion. They cannot treat Hamilton's podium as proof that everything is fine. And they cannot let Leclerc feel that his warning only mattered once the wall proved it. That last part is crucial. A driver needs to feel heard before disaster, not only after it. If Leclerc believes Ferrari truly understood the problem and acted decisively, trust can return. If he feels the team waited too long, the emotional damage becomes deeper. And emotional damage affects lap time. It affects feedback. It affects how much risk a driver is willing to take. It affects whether a driver feels the car is being developed with him or around someone else. That is the hidden danger of Hamilton's rise. Hamilton is doing exactly what Ferrari wanted. But Ferrari must make sure his success strengthens the team, rather than making Leclerc feel left behind. Because the easy narrative is already waiting. Hamilton finished second. Leclerc crashed. Hamilton adapted. Leclerc struggled. Hamilton had the answer. Leclerc had the problem. That story is simple, and that is why it is dangerous. The real story is more complex. Hamilton may have shown Ferrari the direction that works. Leclerc may have shown Ferrari the weakness that direction must solve. One driver is not the whole answer. One crash is not the whole truth. But together they reveal the full picture. Ferrari have a fast car. Ferrari have a brake issue. Ferrari have a driver balance to protect. And Ferrari have very little time to get this right. Because Formula One does not wait for teams to process emotions. The next race arrives. The next braking zone arrives. The next comparison arrives. The next media question arrives. The next championship opportunity arrives. And if Ferrari still have uncertainty, the uncertainty will grow. That is why this first block matters. It frames the entire problem. Ferrari are not in trouble because Leclerc crashed once. They are in trouble because the crash may have exposed a weakness that had already been visible, a solution that may already have existed, and a garage comparison that now cannot be ignored. Monaco did not ask Ferrari whether the SF26 is fast. Hamilton answered that. Monaco asked Ferrari whether the SF26 can be trusted by both drivers when everything is on the line. Leclerc's crash made that answer much less comfortable. And now, the investigation has to uncover whether Ferrari's biggest problem was the moment of impact, or the decisions that allowed the risk to reach that moment in the first place.